Almost exactly a year ago, I came here for the very first time, looking up at the Spanish windows by the trail at the edge of the timberline. I've been off on a journey to find myself, maybe find my way back home. Spent many a night all by myself. In the darkest of nights I was never ever alone. Lo-dee-doo-yay-yay. Back in the San Juan Mountains again, on a ride with some good old boys, telling tales around the campfire. The sound of laughter is the loudest noise. There's just something about a night in the wilderness. It's a magical thing to me. Seems the sky's just a little bit brighter, and your life is everything that you want it to be. Oh-dee-doo-yay-yay. There'll be snow on the passes tomorrow. You can feel it in the chill of the wind. Let the rain wash away all my sorrow. Today is the day that my life starts all over again. Oh-dee-doo-yay-yay. Well, I guess that it's just about over and out. Everything's about to change. Everything's a brand new number, darling. Everything's a brand new game. Funny, I can even call you that after all the pain that we've been through. But while time is the master of healing, you know love is the master of everything we do. We do, yeah. There'll be snow on the passes tomorrow. You can feel it in the chill of the wind. Let the rain wash away all my sorrow. Today is the day that my life starts all over again. Lo-dee-doo-yay-yay-yay.
Thank you, Jeff. That was beautiful. Absolutely rousing this morning. Our invocation today comes from Rumi and is adapted by the Reverend Leslie Takahashi. Come, come, whoever you are, come with your hurts, your imperfections, your places that feel raw and exposed. Come, come, whoever you are. Come with your strengths that the world shudders to hold. Come with your wild imaginings of a better world. Come with your hopes that seems no one wants to hear. Wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, we will make a place for you. We will build a home together. Ours is no caravan of despair. We will walk together. Come, yet again, come.
Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Youngstown, Ohio, where the time, the place, and the spirit intersect. We now meet virtually at 1105 Elm Street at approximately 11:05 a.m. and greet the people of Mahoning Valley and the wider world. I am Melissa Smith, and I'd like to introduce with pleasure the Reverend Walter Clark as our guest minister. Reverend Clark is currently serving as assistant minister to the Arlington, Virginia Unitarian Universalist Church. As for announcements, I direct your attention to the weekly update, which contains the links for religious education services. They will continue the theme of beloved community this week. Grades pre-K through 8th grade begin their meetings at 11:30. The high school group begins at 12. This week, as usual, Lyndall Scharf will hold her meditation group at Sunday at 7 p.m., Wednesday at 11 a.m., and Friday at 5 p.m. I will sit down with all comers for tea, sympathy, and all things considered on Tuesdays at 4. I will now invite Deborah Cunningham to give us our chalice lighting.
Good morning, everyone. When I think of coffee and community, I go back to when I really became immersed in getting to know Youngstown and the Mahoning Valley through my service as an AmeriCorps Vista. In 2015, I left the adjunct life at YSU, where I had been for 15 years, to serve as an AmeriCorps Vista, which, if you're unfamiliar, is similar to a domestic version of the Peace Corps. Vistas commit to a full year of service at organizations with projects that have a mission to alleviate poverty in their communities. The goal of the project that I worked on was to create a community hub in a local elementary school on the south side of Youngstown. This would require creating relationships with the parents and guardians of the students, teachers and staff at the school, residents of the surrounding neighborhood, local, state, and federal officials, and more local organizations and agencies than I could count. I did not come to my VISTA service with a background in community organizing, but thankfully my VISTA partner did. So she taught me the importance of using one-to-ones for building relationships and trust. I also learned quickly that the go-to language for one-to-one invitations was, let's meet for coffee. Over the course of a year and a half, I did coffee with lots of people from the city, as well as from the surrounding suburbs. Looking back, I realize now that in addition to what I learned from the actual conversations, these coffee meetings taught me some unexpected lessons about establishing common grounds, shameless pun intended. Possibly the first bonus lesson that I learned from coffee meetups is that most people had very strong preferences about the meeting location itself. For a variety of reasons, a number of the Southside residents that I met with preferred to stay close, within walking distance of their neighborhood homes. The only choice at that point was the McDonald's, but older residents held fond memories about the old Isley's Busy Bee restaurant, where they often shared stories over coffee and breakfast. I also learned that people predominantly from the suburbs were reluctant to meet downtown, which featured some great popular local cafes, French Specialty, Pressed, and Joe Max, to name a few. Parking was often cited as the problem, but more than once, safety was also mentioned. So I drove to Dunkin' Donuts and Panera in the safer suburbs, though I confess that I struggled to make these trips without feeling bitter and a little suspicious about the real reason some folks felt unsafe in the city. Thankfully, though, a significant contingent of the folks I met preferred the downtown cafes and were vocal advocates for the many benefits to the community of supporting local businesses. But my favorite memory of all for a coffee meetup was when I was invited to the home of a Northside resident who had a homebound caregiver for her husband, that she would welcome me, whom she barely knew, into her home, holding space and providing trust and gracious hospitality speaks volumes about her kindness and generosity. No coffee ever tasted sweeter than the cup I shared with her. In addition to the location, I learned that some people met for coffee because they liked the coffee. Everything from the taste, the roasting methods, the origin of the beans, how it was prepared, how it was served, and how you take it with you. My life as a coffee drinker up to that point consisted of Maxwell House, made in a Mr. Coffee drip coffee maker. Imagine my surprise when I spoke with people who described coffee as if it were a fine wine. They knew the specific regions in Ethiopia, Guatemala, Kenya, Costa Rica, and Sumatra. They knew if the beans were organic, single origin, or microlot. The flavors were described as cozy and dessert-like with hints of chocolate, nuts, and caramel, mellow fruit tones, and balanced acidity. And drip coffee makers were obsolete as aficionados ordered pour-overs and French pressed. In addition, I learned that coffee is flavored by advocacy for social justice and politics. I had heard that coffee became America's drink to separate us from English tea drinkers after the Boston Tea Party protest. But I hadn't known and appreciated learning about fair trade coffee that encourages environmental sustainability, as well as ensuring that the people involved in production were treated and compensated fairly. Sustainable carryout options were also new to me, and I watched new acquaintances bring their own favorite mugs for filling. All of this was and is welcomed knowledge that continues to inform my current coffee consumption practices. And it won't surprise anybody here today to learn that the bulk of this education came from members of the UUYO community. Of course, ultimately, this journey into my beloved community was never about the coffee. The coffee was always the means to an end. But I wouldn't have built the relationships and some precious friendships that I have without those coffee gatherings. And I have always believed, as Cervantes said, that the road is better than the inn. And the road is best with stops along the way for coffee and conversation to create the perfect blend for a rich, robust, and beloved community. We light this chalice in the spirit of community.
And we take a sip of coffee. Thank you, Deborah. That was wonderful. I feel like I don't need to give my sermon now. And I do confess I was this close to calling the service Common Grounds. So thank you. That was absolutely beautiful. I'm the Reverend Walter Clark, and I would now like to take a moment, because I'm sure some of you have some members of your household who may be of the younger, more energetic variety, the types that don't like to sit in front of the computer for long hours on end unless it involves a video game or a Pixar video. They are welcome to come because we are doing a time for all ages. Now, I will confess to you that time for all ages in my home congregation of Arlington is a little different on how we do things. All of our services are pre-recorded. So I make videos. So I'd like to introduce to you a video that I made that talks about the importance of community and a lesson that a hare taught a hyena. Do we have the video?
I didn't know you wanted a video, so I don't have one queued up.
Well, then I'm telling a story. My apologies. I thought I'd sent in the video. So I'm going to tell you a story then. I apologize, there's no video, but I'm going to tell you a story about the hare and the hyena. The hyena lived in the jungle, and he had a great spot that he wanted to build his new house in. He had picked out this spot near the river. There was a great tree that would shade it, and it was far away from everyone else because most of the animals lived far away from each other. They thought it was the best way to live. He had people come to build his house for him. He hired the best contractors, and it took them a month to build his house. When his house was done, Hyena decided that he wanted to throw a huge party to show everyone this big house that he had made. So what he does is he gets this caterer to come over, and it takes this caterer a month to prepare all of the delicious food for the party. Hyena invites everybody in the jungle to come, and the party lasts all day and into the night. The next morning, Hyena wakes up and he thinks to himself, that was a great party. But somebody wasn't there. Hare didn't come to his party. So Hyena decides he's going to pay Hare a visit. He knocks on Hare's door and he says to Hare, "Why didn't you come to my party? Everybody was there last night." And Hare goes, "Oh, your party. Yeah, I heard about that. That was last night, wasn't it? I'm sure it was dull. I'm sure it was boring." And he's like, "But it was great. Why would you want to miss that? You missed it. My new house. It's a wonderful new house." And Hare's like, "Oh yeah, I heard about the house. It's probably like every other house, pretty average. I'm not all that interested." Hyena's like, "All right. You think you're so smart? I challenge you to build a house as good as mine and throw a party as good as mine, and I'm going to give you half the time to do it. And if you can't do it, I'm going to be wearing a new hare fur coat this winter." And that's when Hare realized that he might have spoken out of turn to Hyena and realized he was in a bit of a spot. But Hare was crafty. And Hare decided that he was going to enlist help. So he went to all of the people in the jungle and he asked them, "Can you help me build a house? I want to build the biggest house ever. And if you help me do it in 2 weeks, I will give you a great big surprise." Now, all of the animals, when they heard this, were really intrigued by this gift that Hare had to offer, but they had no idea what it was. So they say, "Okay, we'll do this, but we have one small problem. Where you want to build your house is far away from ours. And I don't want to leave my family for 2 weeks." There's like, "Tell you what, bring your family with them. We'll build small little houses around the area, and then we can all work together on the big house." And everyone decides that's a great idea. So animals come from all around, and they build their small little houses around the area where Hare wants to build his new house. And then they all pitch in and start working. All of them except Hare. What Hare was doing was he was just taking a stick and hitting it on a log the entire time. Now, the animals didn't think too much about this, and they went about their work. And sure enough, in 2 weeks, they had built a home and as big and as beautiful as Hyena's. But they needed to have a feast. And all of the animals decided for the feast, instead of having one person cook the food, they were all going to cook and bring their favorite dishes. It was going to be the best jungle potluck ever. And they all came bringing the dishes they knew best and loved best. And they all played and sang and danced all night long. And when Hyena came, he saw the house and he had to admit that it was as good as his house, if not better. And when Hyena looked at the party, he admitted that food was as good as his, if not better. But he wanted to make sure with Hare, so he goes, "All right, Hare, how is this any better than what I have?" He's like, "I have an extra gift for everybody. I have built a community where everybody can get together and all of our friends are close to each other." And Hyena looked around and saw that indeed everyone was close and having fun. "All right, that's not bad. What about this other gift you say?" And Hare goes, "Watch." And he hits his stick and his log and goes, and pretty soon everybody starts dancing and singing together. And they're all moving and dancing in one to the beat of Rabbit's drum. And that was his second gift. It was the drum that they could all share together. People talked about that party in the jungle for years afterwards. And many people argued that there was a third gift that Hare brought to everyone that day. And it was the music itself. Some people would argue that there was a difference between the music and the drum, Some argued that the music and the drum were actually the same thing. And when Hare was asked about it and what he thought, he didn't say a word, but he loved to listen to that conversation. It's an interesting question whether the music and the drum are two separate things. I'd like to think that the music is what connected everybody. The dancing and the music and all coming together was the feeling that happens when you create a community, how good it feels to work together on something. I know a lot of us are missing our communities right now. We all wish we lived right next to each other and didn't have to wear masks, didn't have to meet outside if we're meeting at all. But I am so glad that we have our music now through this digital virtual format. I am so glad that we all are keeping our communities as best as we can. And I am all glad we are dancing to the beat of our own drum.
Please join me in the covenant. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Each month, we give to an organization that supports transformation in our community, which is the heart of our mission. In our church's historic commitment to the well-being of our community, we give 100% of the offering to those in need. UUYO's Give Away the Plate recipient for February is Black Period. Last year, Black Period established and began to raise funds for a new kind of scholarship at Youngstown State University, the Arlene Floyd Grant and Scholarship Fund. The fund was created to remove financial barriers and challenges for African American students that face them on campus, and that many times become critical barriers to their success. The fund is to help with food in the form of points cards, travel needs, books and other academic supplies, housing, storage, childcare, and other school-related expenses. Black Period founder Carmela Williams said the inspiration for the Arlene Floyd Grant and Scholarship Program was based on the experience of students she had mentored during her 12 years as the assistant director of associate degrees and tech prep programs at YSU. I worked with first generation African American students, she says, and I just saw that they had a ton of barriers to face that really didn't have official support at the university that was specifically for them. Black Period was established by Ms. Williams in May 2020 as a response to the murder of George Floyd and renewed demands for racial justice in the country and in the Mahoning Valley. Black Period's mission is to raise funds and inject resources directly into the Black community. Black Period is formed on the advancement of Black people and has identified 3 pillars to engage, support, and promote opportunity: health and justice for the Black community, wellness, and civic engagement. Black Period also provides tools for white allies as they stand with the Black community against racism and injustice. We will now receive the offering that supports the life of Youngstown, the Mahoning Valley, and our wilder world.
is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace, when our heart is in a holy place. When we trust the wisdom of each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace, when our heart is in a holy place. When we tell our stories from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace, when our heart is in a holy place. When we share the silence of sacred space, and the God of our hearts stirs within, then we feel the power of each other's faith, and our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace, when our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place.
Please join me in a moment of meditation.
A reading this morning is an excerpt from Dr. King's last book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? From time immemorial, men have lived by the principle that self-preservation is the first law of life. But this is a false assumption. I would say that other preservation is the first law of life. It is the first law of life precisely because we cannot preserve self without being concerned about preserving other selves. The universe is so structured, that things go awry if men are not diligent in their cultivation of other regarding dimension. I cannot reach fulfillment without thou. The self cannot be self without other selves. Self-concern without other concern is like a tributary that has no outward flow to the ocean, stagnant, still, and stale. It lacks both life and freshness. Nothing would be more disastrous and out of harmony with our self-interest than for the developed nations to travel the dead end road of inordinate selfishness. We are in the fortunate position of having our deepest sense of morality coalesce with our self-interest.
On the road of experience, trying to find my own way. Sometimes I wish that I could fly away. When I think that I'm moving, suddenly things stand still. And I'm afraid 'cause I think they always will. And I'm looking for space and to find out who I am. And I'm looking to know and understand. It's a sweet, sweet dream. Sometimes I'm almost there. Sometimes I fly like an eagle, and sometimes I'm deep in despair. All alone in the universe, sometimes that's how it seems. I get lost in the sadness and the screams. Then I look in the center, suddenly everything's clear. I find myself in the sunshine and my dreams. And I'm looking for space and to find out who I am. And I'm looking to know and understand. It's a sweet, sweet dream. Sometimes I'm almost there. Sometimes I fly like an eagle, and sometimes I'm deep in despair. On the road of experience, joining the living day. If there's an answer, it's just that way. When you're looking for space and to find out who you are. When you're looking to try and touch the stars. Oh, it's a sweet, sweet, sweet dream. Sometimes I'm almost there. Sometimes I fly like an eagle, and sometimes I'm deep in despair. Sometimes I fly like an eagle, like an eagle, I go flying high.
Thank you again, Jeff. So I guess I hit mute at the same time that the other person hit mute, so I apologize. But all of the best things in my family, they all happened over a cup of coffee. At least this is what was told to me by my mother as I was growing up. See, every Sunday when I was a kid, my mother and we would go to my grandmother's house. My mother would go there for Sunday dinner, and for some reason, Sunday dinner at grandma's was at 1 p.m., which confused an 8-year-old me. We would gather around with my grandmother. Great grandpa Logan and great grandma Logan were there. Grandpa would sit at the head of the table, of course. My aunt and uncle were also there. They were still in high school since they lived with grandma. They were my mother's youngest siblings. And after dinner was over, I would go and play in the living room, usually by myself because the younger siblings had no interest being teenagers in an 8-year-old. And the adults would sit around that dinner table after the plates had been cleared, drinking coffee and talking. And I never paid too much attention to what they said because they didn't talk about what was really important, which was for me at the time, Arthur Fonzarelli and Encyclopedia Brown. Now, some of you may recognize this ritual for what it truly was in a family. It was the catching up of family affairs. This was where all of the big family decisions had been made. When it came time for Grandma and Grandpa Logan to move from their 2-story house to a 1-story house, that discussion was made at the dinner table over a cup of coffee. When it came time for both my teenage aunt and uncle to finally go to college, those decisions were discussed at the dinner table over coffee. When my grandmother's second husband, Claire, was diagnosed with cancer and was given about a year to live, they diagnosed what to do with the rest of his life over a cup of coffee. They sat together at that dinner table with slow and purposeful intention, and they talked about the hard topics. All of the best decisions were made over a cup of coffee. And what was amazing is that coffee didn't lose its magic if it left the dinner table. There was one time that my great grandfather knocked on the door of the house when I was a kid and asked if he and my mother could have a cup of coffee. This was his generation's way of saying we need to have a serious conversation. The conversation being that his wife, my great grandmother, was working him to death. He was in his late 70s and he wanted to take a break. But every time he scratched an item off of his to-do list, it seemed like Grandma Logan would add 2 more. So after he left, my mother invited Grandma for a cup of coffee. And that's when Grandma told my mother that of course she added more things to the to-do list. My grandfather was of a certain generation, like I said, that would refuse to leave anything undone for his wife. She wanted to make sure that he wouldn't leave her. She was scared that he was going to die. There was nothing to do. These moments of vulnerability, of decision, of closeness, they were all made over a cup of coffee. Now, some of you may have guessed that yes, I do personally love a good cup of coffee. But before I continue this love song to my favorite beverage, I do want to address all of my tea drinking friends who are out there listening. This sermon does include you too. It's about the act of sharing a hot beverage. And I am using coffee because it is my beverage of choice. It's what I am familiar with. You could say it's my beverage orientation. I did experiment with tea a little bit in college with some wonderful tea drinking friends, but it just wasn't for me. So some of you may be strictly tea, some of you may be strictly coffee, some of you may have that wonderful palate that can appreciate both, and some of you may prefer no hot beverage at all. Know that I include all of you, no matter what taste you imbibe. I have always said that coffee in my family, it was a sacrament, it was sacred. To sit at that table with a hot cup of coffee was to partake in a ceremony that imparted divine grace upon those present. It isn't the actual trappings of the sacrament that make it divine. It never is about the physical trappings. It's not about the coffee itself. It's not about the cup. It's not about the table everyone sits around. What makes something sacred is the intention that is put into the experience. The act of sitting down with a cup of coffee was a signal to my family. It was time to open up. It was time to put your judgment aside. It was time to listen deeply. To drink coffee as a family was a symbol of honesty and of grace. It marked a time where we could all be real with each other and we could all work towards something together that was best for everyone involved. And I am sure many of you have experienced the sharing of self that comes with a good cup of coffee or tea, as we heard earlier. Perhaps some of you even had this experience sharing it over coffee hour in your own building, maybe sharing it over a virtual coffee hour. And I know some of you out there have met up at your local coffee shop to find an old friend and to delve deep into connection with each other. Personally, as a minister, I have used coffee shops as a place for pastoral care visits. And I have seen many a beautiful soul open up over a very strong Americano. The act of sharing coffee mirrors the act of sharing oneself. Now, sharing oneself is important for survival. We heard it in the reading from Dr. King, and I'm going to share with you another reading from Howard Thurman. This is from his book, The Search for Common Ground. And he puts it this way. I am going to change the language a little bit to be more gender inclusive. A person is always threatened in their very ground by a sense of isolation, by feeling themselves cut off from their fellows. Yet they can never separate themselves from their fellows, for mutual interdependence is a characteristic of all life. The need to care for and the need to be cared for is another expression of the same basic idea. It is unnecessary to resort to a moral or religious authority for a mandate or an injunction. Such needs are organic, whatever their psychological or spiritual derivatives. Therefore, whenever the individual is cut off from the private and personal nourishment of other individuals or from particular individuals, the result is a wasting away, starvation, a failure of their life to be sustained or nourished. They can never separate themselves from their fellows, for mutual interdependence is a characteristic of all life. Mutual interdependence. Does that sound familiar to any of you? Sounds a lot like the language of our seventh principle, the interdependent web of existence. And I love this quote from Thurman because it gets to the heart of this sacrament of togetherness. We need each other. This is a need that is beyond religion, that is beyond science, that is beyond psychology. The need to care and to be cared for is integral to survival. We need each other to survive. If you were following Soul Matters, you know that the theme for this month is beloved community. And I picture personally beloved community not just as people with different backgrounds and perspectives living in close proximity to each other without hatred, but people from every stripe and station caring for and needing to be cared for by each other. In my version of beloved community, it is a place where anyone can invite anyone for coffee and have that sacramental experience of deep sharing, where we can put aside judgment, where we can put aside assumptions, and where we can listen openly. And this is hard. This is such hard work because it fights against so many things that we have been taught by the society and the white supremacy culture that we all are a part of. We have been bred to not share, to not go deep with each other. And I'm going to continue this with my coffee metaphor because there is a coffee entity out there which exemplifies this lack of sharing. And it's Starbucks. Now, before people point out that I've mentioned Starbucks as a great place for people to gather and that I have a love of Starbucks, before we start the debate of your local coffee house versus the great green monolith that is killing small independent business, let me explain this metaphor a little bit further. There is this book called the Triple Soy Decaf Latte Era. And I really hesitate to call it a book because it is basically a glorified business pamphlet that weighs in at 40 pages. But what it talks about, I think, speaks to what this metaphor is about. And it talks about the highly individualized and tailored practice of how coffee is ordered at Starbucks. You get to decide your size. Obviously, you get to decide whether it's hot or cold. You can even ask for a certain temperature range. You get to decide whether or not you add hot milk or steamed milk. You get to decide if you want foam, how much foam. You get to decide how much drizzle, how many pumps of flavor. You get to decide between almond milk, soy milk, whole milk, skim milk, oat milk, coconut milk, and rice milk. What you get is absolutely 100% tailored to you and your individual tastes alone. And I'm going to be honest with you. I personally love the experience. I will always take an Americano over a drip coffee if I am at Starbucks. I will on occasion splurge for a cold brew or a nitro brew. I will even get a latte once in a while. And when I do, I specifically ask for almond milk because I am of a certain age where dairy and I don't get along as well as we used to. This way of doing things at Starbucks, this individualized, highly tailored taste, is wonderful for business. It's wonderful for an individual experience. And it is not a good way to run a community. So let's do a thought experiment in regards to this. Let's imagine that our coffee hour in person at church is run like a Starbucks, right? You've got somebody with the espresso machine and a barista or two taking orders. Have you ever been in a Starbucks where 70 people all come up at the same time and order coffee? You're going to have a long, long wait for this experience. If you were to do this at church, you might be able to do it fairly quickly if you had 10 baristas and 5 espresso machines, but I'm wondering if your finance committee would approve something of that magnitude. Something like that is not sustainable for community work. A community cannot be perfectly tailored to every single individual's specific desires. For the idea to be a part of something larger and to not have to compromise your own personal tastes or ways is unsustainable. In order to make sure everyone can get their cup of coffee or tea, we have to give up our triple soy decaf lattes when we're a part of that larger community. Let me give you an example of how this plays out. I've heard that your congregation in Youngstown has recently passed the 8th principle. So I just want to real quick give everybody permission to do this for passing that. That is fantastic. Though we here in Arlington, our congregation passed that a year ago, and I was a part of that process. And in trying to get that principle passed, we encountered some issues, some troubles. We had people in our congregation who totally agreed with the sentiment that systemic racism was wrong, but they didn't like the exact language and wording of the principle. We had people who definitely thought that racism was a bad idea and that there was systemic suppression, but they thought that adding an 8th principle seemed kind of superfluous. I mean, don't the other principles kind of cover this idea? We had people who absolutely agreed that racism and systemic oppression was wrong, but do we really need to have a principle added every time there's a political issue? Everybody in the congregation agreed. The core of the principle was good and just and needed. And a couple people got bogged down in the details. It happens. Everybody liked the coffee, but some people wanted to make it a specific way and wanted everybody to have that specific way. And it was a way that wasn't sustainable for everyone. And this is why earned coffee is the best. Pun intended, it is the common ground where we all start from. No, it's not Starbucks. It's not exactly what you want. But you get to look around that room and see everybody with a cup of coffee or tea in their hands, being welcomed into community, being fed and sustained, as opposed to just a handful who like it a specific way. You get to see everyone drink from the same urn. And that is the secret, the coffee as a sacrament. It isn't the quality of the coffee. It's the quality of the connection. I would rather have a weak cup of coffee and a good conversation than a good cup of coffee and no one to share it with. That is the secret to connection and beloved community. It is not going to be exactly how you imagine it. It is going to take some work. It is going to take some sacrifice, and it is going to take some personal change. Those conversations my family had around the dinner table, they were not easy. People got upset. There were hard truths shared, and there were a lot of long, quiet pauses. And it was in those pauses of reflection and listening that the change took place. That was where people got to digest what was going on and how they could be a part of something bigger. And my mother always said that coffee is good for digestion. Let's take a moment. Let us breathe deep. I invite you all to get comfortable where you are. If you are comfortable doing so, put your feet on the floor. Put your hands in your lap if you're able. And just breathe in deep for a moment. I'm going to share with you now a prayer that was written by Liz Weber. And it is called For All That Is Our Life. Spirit of life, help us to be present with all that is our life, both our deepest sorrows and our greatest joys, so that we can truly live, engaging fully in our own life and in our own community. Spirit of community, help us know how linked we are, how each one of our cares touches us all. Help us to ask for support when we are in need, and offer our support to others when we are able, so that we may rest in the solace of one another's love. Spirit of love, and help us to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, so that we might fully embody love, and may we resist hatred. Spirit of resistance, help us to stick up for what is right, even when we are tired or afraid. Help us to dream in the world as it should be, and to act to bring that world about. Help us to find hope each day. Spirit of hope, help us through this day and each day. Help us to be present for all that is our life. For this, we pray. Amen. Blessed be.
I am sending you light to heal you, to hold you. I am sending you light to hold you in love. No matter where you go, no matter where you've been, you'll never walk alone. I feel you deep within. I am sending you light to heal you, to hold you. I am sending you light to hold you in love. No matter what you feel or what you choose to show, I'm always there for you, and I just want you to know that I am sending you light to heal you, to hold you. I am sending you light to hold you in love. I walk the path with you. Go slow, dear one, don't hurry. I'll go just like you need to go. There is no need to worry. I am sending you light to heal am sending you light to hold you in love.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we keep in our hearts until we meet again.
Jeff, the song you sang, I Am Sending You Light, was absolutely beautiful. And I challenge each and every one of you out there listening to know that you are the light, that you are the light that sends love, that sends healing, that can hold, that can build strong connections. You are the light that we have all been waiting for. Whether we are the virtual LED lights of our cathode television LCD screens, or whether we bask in each other's personal space, know that your being is needed to illuminate this world. You are the light. Go forth and make this world a beautiful place. May it be so. Amen.
All through the day, all through the night, dwell in the promises, walk in the light. Darkness will flee at God's command. All through the day and night we're in God's hands. All through the day, all through the night, dwell in the promises, walk in the light. Darkness will flee at His command. All through the day and night we're in God's hands. All through the day and night